Hey everybody, welcome back to the Point Podcast. Hope everybody's doing well. On a Monday after an extended break, no show on Friday, went up to the Capitol for the weekend in Fredericton. See my sister play some hockey, got to see some friends. So overall, a great weekend for yours truly. I hope you guys all had a great weekend as well. Through all of those interactions, still a lot of sports that I consumed this weekend. Lots to get into today. Of course, got back home in plenty of time to make sure that I was all set up to watch the National Football League yesterday. Watched a lot of college. I got some NHL thoughts. So we're going to get to it all today. And set up the week here on the show. Tuesday, tomorrow, Seamus will join, as usually does. We'll talk about a number of different things. Thursday, Ben Murray is going to join the show around 5 p.m., 4 p.m. 5 p.m. here in Atlantic, 4 p.m. his time in Ontario. So we're going to talk a lot of NFL. He's a Michigan State Spartan fan, which tough year for them in college football. He's also a Columbus Blue Jacket fan, so I want to get his thoughts on where the team's going, what he wants them to do moving forward, rebuild, trade away some pieces. We'll touch on that on Thursday. And then on Friday, we will do a regular Big Money Friday. And I didn't gamble yesterday on the NFL, which I just needed a little bit of a break and needed just to sit back and enjoy the games a little bit. I gave some advice to some people. People texted me and I gave them my thoughts. I look at yesterday as a whole. The least surprising results for me, Raiders beating the Seahawks. I texted multiple people. I said, do not take the Seahawks money line. Take the Raiders as an underdog on the road. Raiders won the game. I also said that on Thursday's show, that I thought the Raiders were a good bet. They ended up winning the game. They've had a horrible season, but Seattle was due for a loss like that, and the Raiders gave it to them yesterday. The Tampa Bay loss, surprising. But at the same time, I looked at that game, and something was weird about it. Jacoby Brissett sendoff game, where next Sunday, the bane of my existence returns. Deshaun Watson will be in uniform for the Cleveland Browns against the Houston Texans. His old team, that's of course his first game. He returns from suspension. Jacoby Brissett has led this team beautifully. He gets no reward for it. That's pro sports. I wish the Browns nothing but failure the rest of the way, although they will win their first game because they're playing the Houston Texans, who are absolutely pathetic. So Tampa faltering surprised me. Kansas City didn't look great yesterday. I didn't think Miami looked great against Houston Texans, both double-digit favorites in games. We'll touch on that in a little bit. San Francisco beats the Saints, shut them out. Not exactly an impressive offensive day, but that's, they get the job done there. But the most impressive win of the day for me was the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals have beaten the Tennessee Titans at home 2 straight games. They beat them last year in the AFC divisional round, in the playoffs, and they beat them yesterday. Tennessee is not an easy place to play, and Tennessee is not an easy team to play. They are hard-nosed. They are well-coached. And they're stingy. When you think you have them beat, you don't. On paper, you are so much more talented than the Tennessee Titans, but then they punch you in the mouth, and the game's a lot closer than you might think. Mike Vrabel knows how to coach football, and he does it to a very high level in Tennessee with a roster that is not impressive. But they sit with a 7-4 record, and they were an underdog at home yesterday, but I thought they looked good. They played tough. But the reason I'm more impressed with the Bengals, I think it's the most impressive win of the day. You're on the road against a team that's currently leading their division that was the number 1 seed in the AFC last year. You're banged up. You're without a starting offensive lineman. You're without Joe Mixon, your starting running back. You're without Jamar Chase, your star wide receiver. And you go on the road and you win that game. Your pass rush held up decent. Joe Burrow had an excellent game. And I just look at this team. Their defense is starting to come together. Their defense is starting to play like the defense we saw last year. Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard disrupting the quarterback. Jesse Bates, Awuzie, DJ Reader in that secondary making big plays. Cincinnati's not a team I'd want to meet in the postseason. They're just a tough out. They know what it takes now. They're confident. They have a swagger about them. They got a clutch kicker. I just look at Cincinnati, and they get better every week. And I see teams getting worse in the AFC. Baltimore, for instance. We'll touch on them later. Cincinnati lost to Baltimore, their first meeting. They won't lose to them again because Joey B gets better as the season goes along. He had to find ways to win yesterday without Jamar Chase, as I mentioned. Samaje Perine, backup running back, made some big plays, run game and pass game. Hayden Hurst, who was a quiet pickup in the offseason from Atlanta, he's been really good for the Bengals this season in blocking schemes, but also just catching the football. He always seems to find a way to get open. He's the third down conversion machine for the Bengals. I also think Zach Taylor's a pretty decent coach. There's a lot of bad coaching in the NFL. Just look at Denver. Look at Tampa Bay, for Christ's sakes. What they're doing down there on a weekly basis. Cincy has all the ingredients. They just have to put it together. What Cincinnati can be is a Camaro, but they got to make sure the engine is in there. And it's easy to say, well, Joe Burrow's that engine. That's too simplistic for football. There are games where you'll win 58-55 and you'll win a shootout. You can't do that every week. It's not sustainable. It just doesn't work. That's not the way the laws of physics say eventually a defense is going to give an offense some trouble. Yesterday, the Bengals won 20-16. That's a defensive battle. That means that the front for Tennessee played pretty well. They got pressure on the quarterback, and they did a good job of limiting drives, which is what Tennessee does. They'll give up plays, but you get to the red area, they get sacks, they make big plays that can lead to punts from the 40 of the Tennessee Titans or force them to long field goals, which is a win, either way you look at it. But with the Bengals secondary playing as well as they did yesterday, the way they stopped the run with Derrick Henry, and I just think they're ballers. Jesse Bates is one of the best defensive players in the NFL, period. He was last year in the playoffs as well. This team knows what it takes now. They want to get back to another Super Bowl. They believe that they can do it. And it all starts with your leadership, and Joe Burrow is that quarterback. Joe Burrow is going to be the guy that says, we can do this. I won a damn national championship at LSU. I went undefeated. This isn't going to stop me. And quite frankly, the Bengals got to play the Bucs down the stretch. The Bengals have to play the Chiefs next weekend, which is I can't wait for that one. Two best teams in the AFC right now will meet next Sunday. I'll even go as far as to say this. The Cincinnati Bengals are a better football team currently, and I think moving forward, than the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills got the hype. The Buffalo Bills got all the praise. I don't care. Kansas City was always better than them. I said that from week 0, and I've been right every time. Buffalo's squeaking out wins against the Detroit Lions. Buffalo has lost to the Jets. They've lost to the Dolphins. They play weird games where Josh Allen makes a 40-yard incredible throw on Thursday. First 3 quarters, he played like an average QB. He made average plays. He wasn't anything special. Big moment, you give me the football. I'll take Joe Burrow over Josh Allen any day of the week. If I had to do a quarterback rankings quick off the top of my head, number 1 is Mahomes. And number two, we're seeing a changing of the guard, folks. Tom Brady's no longer a top 5, top 10 quarterback. Just isn't. That's over. He's the GOAT. He's the best of all. That doesn't change the fact that he's a little bit old. Now, that doesn't change my opinion. I think Tampa could go to the Super Bowl from the NFC. Because the NFC is not that strong. I'm sticking with my pick of Kansas City, San Francisco. That doesn't mean they can't get there. Mahomes. Then I go with Joe Burrow. Sure, stick Josh Allen in third. That's fine. It's fine. It's a good spot for him. But that's where they are. 3 best teams in the AFC and the 3 best quarterbacks. And oddly enough, Kansas City of the 3 teams has the worst defense. It's not terrible, but it's the worst one. But they also have the best player in the league. They got that difference maker. To me, the Bengals are a team you don't want to play. Getting that bye is vital. Vital. The Bills are 8-3. The Bengals are 7-4. The Chiefs are 9-2. Here's what the Bills need to hope for. Bengals got the Chiefs next weekend, as you just said. Can't wait. 5:25 game. 5 o'clock has been a dead window in this NFL season because a lot of teams out west, quite frankly, stink. Rams stink. Cardinals stink. Raiders kind of stink. Broncos stink. Next Sunday at the 5 o'clock window. I don't know what you're doing next Sunday at the 5 o'clock window, but don't go to a stupid game or something. Just stay home. You got Dolphins 49ers, 5:05. Pretty good game. And you got Chiefs Bengals at 5:25. Also at 5:25, Raiders Chargers, which is a spicy game. Spicy game. It's got more importance after the Raiders win yesterday. But what the Bills need to hope for, Bengals can beat the Chiefs at home. And then the Bills, if they win out, would have the same record as the Chiefs. But the Bills beat the Chiefs head-to-head, and they'd have the tiebreaker and get the first seed in the AFC. Because you do not want to play the Bengals in a divisional playoff round. If you recall, only 1 team in each conference gets a bye, not 2 anymore. If the Chiefs finish first, they would get the lowest seed possible. I think Bengals and Bills will be 2 and 3 in no particular order. Meaning the Bengals, so the Chiefs in the divisional round could get the Dolphins. They could get the Jets, Team X. I don't care who it is. I'll play that team before I play the Bengals. And I wouldn't want to play the Bills either in that play game until the last possible second. Let those 2 teams duke it out and then play you when they're tired, when they just went through a war. But to me, that was the clear definition of a massive win yesterday and tides changing. The Bengals had an average start. Joe Burrow had a poor start. Their offensive line was on a historically bad pace. They since started to play way better football. They look more confident, and the team is gelling. Look out for the Bengals. Now, I mentioned the guard changing. Tom Brady's 45. This might be his last season. It might not be. He's divorced. He's in his last year of his deal in Tampa Bay. Maybe he wants to go play somewhere else. Who knows? It's not like he's the worst. He's better than Davis Mills. He's better than half the league at quarterback. Still, Tom Brady at his age. But you look at Tom Brady, and you look at Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson, for that matter. 3 quarterbacks that will likely all get into the Hall of Fame. And they're all playing pretty average to bad. There's different ranges. To me, Tom Brady has played about a 40% level of what he's capable of this year. Go look at his touchdown passes ratio. Go look at what they're doing in Tampa. I think his coaching's been awful. I'll put that out right away. The new way to play in the NFL is passing. Absolutely. You need a great passer to win. There's no debate. I'm not going to fight that. But, I do know this from watching football for 24 years, and I think I know the game pretty well. When you don't run the football, like ever, and you do a play-action play, 35% of your plays yesterday, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm going to repeat this from off the top, you don't run the football, I don't think the defense is going to bite on the run play. You know why? Because you don't fucking run the football. It makes the play-action bootleg rollout irrelevant because the defense stays in the box, the defense stays in their position, and guys are covered. Yesterday, Tom Brady had to throw seam routes down to Mike Evans the whole damn game. He missed a lot of those throws. Who was the other key contributor? Running backs. Rachaad White had 9 catches yesterday for only 40 yards, meaning check down Charlie the whole damn day because nobody else was open. Chris Godwin isn't what he used to be. And this offense isn't explosive. They don't run the football. They refuse to do it on offense. Byron Leftwich has been failing as a coordinator this season, period. You have bad coaching, and then you have a quarterback that's not hitting open receivers a lot of the time as well. There's no reason for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to lose to the Cleveland Browns yesterday. None. Cleveland had a bottom 5 defense in the NFL, and the Bucs didn't put up 20 points. Tom Brady had a below-average day. He got the ball twice in overtime, and he did not get a point. Did not get a point. I still think the Tampa Bay Bucs are dangerous, and it might be just because I think the NFC is weak. But I look at that team, they make mistakes, they get delayed game penalties, they get a ton of false starts in Tampa Bay. And they just play loose football like it's just whatever happens, happens. It's not, and that's not the way Tom Brady's teams play. Chris Godwin looks old. Mike Evans has had 9 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He looks a little banged up to me. Getting a little long in the tooth. You have an old quarterback. You have an aging receiving core. An offensive line that's been around a block or two. And a defense that's had a lot of reps, that's played a lot of football in the last couple of years. That doesn't spell success. And yet, I will repeat, they would scare me. They would scare me in the NFC because Tom Brady knows how to win in the playoffs better than anybody that's ever played a sport, other than Bill Russell. He just knows when to turn it on and how that team's going to win a certain game, playing a certain style. But if you can't run the football, you can't keep possession long enough. You lost to a Cleveland yesterday, only went to overtime because Cleveland's offense was anemic. They couldn't do anything either. Jacoby Brissett looked banged up, but he gutted Cleveland to that win. And kudos to him. Kudos to Jacoby Brissett because he battled yesterday. He rushed on big plays. He made some big throws down the field. And we saw some triumphant moments where in the fourth quarter, the Browns went for it on 4th down, and Jacoby Brissett threw a crisp, clean ball to Amari Cooper. And he dropped an easy first down. The easiest catch he's ever made in his career, and he dropped it. Turnover on downs. To Amari's credit, he got targeted again in overtime in the end zone. He caught the football. A walk-off win for the Browns at home. And they improve to 4-7. And oddly enough, they're still in the mix. in the AFC. Now, the Browns tied that game late. I wanted them to go for 2 like a couple other teams yesterday, but they did not. But Cleveland remains in the mix in the AFC because you're still fighting for spots. Let's go to the next team, as I mentioned. Green Bay. With aging quarterback struggling. Green Bay last night lost the game 40-33. But the game should have been that close. Philly was a far better team last night. They ran the ball for over 300 yards. They possessed it, but what kept Green Bay in the game was mistakes. Green Bay stuffed Jalen Hurts on a quarterback sneak in the first quarter. That actually gave Green Bay the lead 14-13 after they had 13 points in their first 2 possessions following one of Aaron Rodgers' 2 interceptions. Aaron Rodgers did not play the back half of the third quarter or the entire fourth quarter with an oblique injury, and yet Green Bay was in the game because Jordan Love hit Christian Watson on a crossing pattern and he took it home for a 63-yard touchdown. Green Bay is in a weird spot here where they are 4-7. They are in the mix, but they're going to need a lot of help to make the playoffs. They're going to need a lot of teams to lose, and they're going to need a lot of things to go right for that team to get in. I believe they have the Lions next week, so it's a divisional game. Aaron Rodgers will be questionable with that oblique injury. Following that game, they have a bye, and I believe they play the Bears. It's either the Lions next week, then Bears, or Bears-Lions. They have 2 straight divisional games. They're going to play the Dolphins on Christmas Day. No gimme win. They're going to play the Vikings again, who have the second best record in the NFC. There's a division game this week. The Packers lost to the Lions in their first meeting. If Green Bay loses this week and falls to 4-8, sorry, they're 4-8 now. If they fall to 4-9, they haven't had their bye week yet, they should sit Aaron Rodgers for the remainder of the season. Let him have surgery if he's going to have surgery, although he said last week he does not want to have surgery on his thumb. I don't know what the reason is, but he said he doesn't want to, even after the season. I don't know if there's a vaccine in that surgery now, but he doesn't want any part of it. But for me, if you're 4-9, you're not making the playoffs, you have a banged-up quarterback, and it's one of the most disappointing seasons in recent memory for a team that I thought was going to be really good. But you need to look at it and say, what do we have in Jordan Love? This is Jordan Love's 3rd season in the NFL. He's got 1 career start because Aaron Rodgers got COVID last season. Other than that, we've seen him in the preseason. We saw him last night in relief. He went 9 for 13 last night for 118 yards and a touchdown. Impressive, but that was 65 yards on one of those plays. But we don't know if he can be a quarterback, if he can be their quarterback of the future. Aaron Rodgers is on the hook next year for $50 million. I doubt he retires when he could collect $50 million to play another year, but it is Aaron Rodgers. If anybody's going to pass up that kind of money, it will be him. I don't know. But at the very least, you want to get your starting quarterback, your franchise quarterback, healthy. So going into that next season, you know he's 100% when the season starts, when training camp opens. And you get to see what Jordan Love is at the same time. I look at Green Bay, and last night on defense, they kind of just gave in. They got pushed over. The Philadelphia Eagles had over 300 yards rushing last night. Jalen Hurts ran for 150 yards last night. He ran for over 100 in the first half. It was as though Green Bay did not know that Jalen Hurts was a mobile quarterback. He had so much running room. He could do anything he wanted on that field, and they did not seem to care. This was a defense that was projected to be top 5 in the league at the start of the season by most outlets. And they are bottom 5 in every category. They had 9 missed tackles last night, the Green Bay Packers. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be that guy anymore. He doesn't look as focused. His throws aren't as crisp. Christian Watson seems to be coming together as a receiver, but he has nobody else. They'll have a first-round pick. It might be a higher pick. If they continue to lose games, they'll pick in the top 10. Doesn't mean they're going to take a receiver. This isn't a receiver-rich draft, quite frankly. Jordan Addison out of USC, but he's had a banged-up season. I'm not sure. I think his stock is falling week by week because he can't stay healthy, and Caleb Williams is throwing touchdowns to other receivers. Green Bay's in a difficult spot. They got no cap room. They got a quarterback that's aging that they need to hold on to. And what will be really interesting to me as well is what happens with Matt LaFleur. Because Matt LaFleur has had an MVP at quarterback the last 2 years, and then this year has been a complete disaster. I don't think this season warrants a firing. I don't think he should be fired. Doesn't make any sense to me. But it's the NFL. Crazy things happen. Mike McCarthy stayed for a long time in Green Bay. I think he was there 13 years. But he won a Super Bowl. He got to a Super Bowl, right? Matt LaFleur hasn't got to one with this team. With Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, winning 2 MVPs, having Devontae Adams, you couldn't get them past Jimmy Garoppolo. Mike McCarthy got to an NFC Championship game against the Atlanta Falcons. Matt LaFleur hasn't been able to do that. This defense is quitting on the team. It's a weakness. Sure, you can fire defensive coordinator Joe Barry, but is that the only firing you make? Green Bay's a team that can't do a whole lot. It's so hard to gut your roster. Look at the New Orleans Saints. Yes, they got Chris Olave, who I love, who I think will win NFC Offensive Rookie Player of the Year. But they have no cap room because they signed Drew Brees and they got Taysom Hill and they signed Michael Thomas, gave him a big extension. You got injuries, you got players that just aren't consistent, and you're stuck. You got Andy Dalton at quarterback, and you got Alvin Kamara who's hurt every second week, and your team's 4-8. That's what you got. That seems to be what happened. And Green Bay, to me, is heading down that road. What happened? Sean Payton left the Saints because he knew it wasn't going to be good there. Now, Matt LaFleur, I don't think, has the cachet to say, I want to lead the Packers. He's only been a head coach for 4 years. But if it was, you see college guys, they leave their job at one school to go to another. You always hear, well, there's so many great coaching candidates around. Okay. Kevin O'Connell seems to be a good hire in Minnesota. He's been successful. Lovie Smith has not worked out in Houston. He's going to be one and done. He's going to be fired. Mike McDaniel has been a good hire in Miami. It's a perfect fit. That's worked out to perfection. That can happen. But then there's Nathaniel Hackett, who is on the verge of being fired, and quite frankly, I'm surprised he has not been fired yet. Because I talk about aging quarterbacks who look worse and worse by the week. Russell Wilson is the poster child for that. Defining the Denver Broncos offense as anemic is doing it a favor, is giving it too much credit. The Denver Broncos do not have an identity on offense. They don't have an identity as a team. And I look at coach and I look at quarterback because that's where it starts. I could look at John Elway, who's failed at getting any kind of quarterback other than Peyton Manning since he's been there. Sometimes hindsight's 20/20. Sometimes hindsight's just you look at it in the face. I told you guys on this fine program, I didn't think the Russell Wilson trade was a smart one. I saw regression in Russell Wilson in Seattle. And I said, you know what? I don't want him. I see a quarterback that's getting worse every year, not better. I see a guy who's not completing as many passes. I see a guy who's not that athletic. And he's leaving Seattle, who has DK Metcalf, who has Tyler Lockett, and Will Dissly, to go to Denver. Cortland Sutton is constantly injured. Jerry Jeudy is inconsistent. And Patrick tore his ACL in the spring, not available to play. Running, you lose Javonte Williams, but the offense was bad before. You would have cut Melvin Gordon because he was fumbling the football. He had more fumbles than rushing touchdowns this season for the Denver Broncos. And Denver's got 5 more years with Russell Wilson. He's going to be 34 in a couple weeks. And you got 5 more years to sit on that with over $180 million guaranteed. Well, here's the rub there. I wouldn't want Russell Wilson, but you're stuck with him because nobody's going to take him, and you got to make it work. Number one, Nathaniel Hackett is a carbon copy example of a guy that is a coordinator, really good coordinator, probably going to be a great quarterbacks coach for the next decade in the NFL. Maybe he'll go to college, work with college quarterbacks, and he'll be the guru of working with a quarterback. But he's not a head coach. He can probably call plays, but he's not a head coach. He can't do clock management, and that team doesn't want to play for him. The Denver defense has passion. They play tough every weekend. I gave the stat last week. If the Denver Broncos had averaged 18 points a game in their first 10 games, they would be 9-1. 18 points. That's 23rd in the NFL for points per game. And they would be 9-1. But they are 4-7. They're 4-7. They're not in it. They got no hope. Oh, pardon me, they're 3-8. They're worse. I gave them more credit. They're 3-8 after losing to the Carolina Panthers yesterday. Carolina, who turned to Sam Darnold after going through P.J. Walker, going through Baker Mayfield, just a car wash of quarterbacks. Here's what I propose in Denver. Fire Nathaniel Hackett. Do it tomorrow. Do it today if you really want to. The rest of the season doesn't matter. You don't have your first-round pick. He's going to Seattle. Ouch. That hurts. But again, you got to suck it up. You made the trade. See what you can do. All I know is that in the first 2 seasons with Matt LaFleur, Aaron Rodgers won an MVP. I don't know what Matt LaFleur wants to do. I don't think there's a 0% chance he doesn't get fired. I think there's a chance he gets fired, quite frankly. I don't think it'd be the correct decision, but I've seen organizations make quick, rash decisions before. And then we look at it and say, Aaron and Matt just can't coexist anymore. We're stuck with Aaron for a year. Let's get a new coach in here. And maybe that can solve an issue, like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. But again, maybe that is the quick fix. I think it's a stupid decision, but I wouldn't rule it out because organizations make stupid decisions all the time. Just look at the Washington Commanders yesterday and their Sean Taylor statue. Let's say he gets fired even if he stays in Green Bay. What if Denver inquires about Matt LaFleur? Because I think Denver needs a veteran head coach that has experience at the job. Because quite frankly, if Denver's going to be successful and it's going to be tough with Russell Wilson, I get it. But Javonte Williams will be back. Maybe you can find something. But you need a boss in there that's going to tell, in particular, the offensive players, but I'm looking at the quarterback, to cut the shit. Russell Wilson is a fake leader. To me, he is everything that you don't want as an organization. Russell Wilson, from everybody that's talked, is a bad teammate. They don't like being around him. You saw his defensive line, Mike Purcell, yesterday got right in his face. And Richard Sherman hates him. Marshawn Lynch hates him. Earl Thomas hates him. That whole Seattle defense hates Russell Wilson. They say he's a selfish player. He wants the attention to be on him. And Richard Sherman told that story about having to go through handlers to get a hold of Russell Wilson. Maybe then that's not true, but again, Sherman's pretty good, and I think he knows what he's doing when it comes to media work. Well, I think you need a boss in there that's done the job and knows what he's doing. So I think there's two potential hires for Denver. Matt LaFleur, because he knows how to work with quarterbacks, and I think he runs a good offense. You need to get pieces. You need to hope Cortland Sutton can come back. Javonte Williams returns from injury. Get rid of Jerry Jeudy. He's not part of the future. Improve that offensive line. There's a lot of work to do. One thing you will say is that defense is elite. That's a place to start. And if you're a coach, you can look at that and say, you know what, I got a good defensive coordinator. I don't need to bring in a guy. I know what my defense is. He can continue to coach it up. So I would target Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, and I would target Sean Payton. Sean Payton's working at Fox. He's pretty good on TV. He's got a good personality. But he's got decisions to make. I think Sean Payton wants to get back into coaching. I don't think Denver would be number one on his job list, quite frankly, because I don't think Russell Wilson is that intriguing. But coaching in Denver does have special feelings. You're going to work with John Elway. You're going to work for the Robert Walton, the Walmart owner who's got deep pockets. He might be able to pay Sean Payton $12 to $15 million a year to go coach that football team, and I'm not even joking. If Sean can turn around Drew Brees with a busted wing in New Orleans after Miami failed him during his physical and the Chargers cut him, maybe Sean Payton can turn around Russell Wilson. He knows how to coach up offense. Sean Payton is not a guru. He's won one Super Bowl. But Russell Wilson's only won one Super Bowl. And Russell Wilson gets talked about like he's a superstar, great quarterback. If I'm the Denver Broncos, those are my two targets as my next head coach. And you can start that work now. We saw in college this weekend, teams are still playing. They're hiring head coaches out the wazoo. Call Sean Payton, see what he thinks. Now, I think Sean Payton wants the Chargers job, personally. I think he wants to coach Justin Herbert. But the Chargers won a late game yesterday, and maybe Brandon Staley will keep that job if they make the playoffs. And they'll look at it and say, you know what, we like Sean Payton, but we'll stick with Brandon Staley. We thought he was a good hire. He's gotten it this far. Now, if they miss the playoffs, I think the Chargers will fire Brandon Staley, and I think Sean Payton will be their head coach. But sometimes, if Sean Payton misses the job that much, maybe he'll take a job in Denver that he wouldn't originally. And money always talks, folks. Look at FIFA. Look at the World Cup. It's in Qatar because they paid more money than other countries to get it. It's not because it's a good place to be. It's in Qatar because they rigged their way into getting it. That's my plan from the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton's been great in the draft. He tried to trade up to get Patrick Mahomes. Pretty good read, but Andy Reid was too quick for him. He saw that he was going to be a superstar. If he had drafted Patrick Mahomes, Sean Payton would still be coaching the Saints. I think he takes a job this offseason because there's not that many great coaches available. If I had to guess, let's go through this already. Let's do it here on a Monday. Houston will have a new coach. They will fire Lovie Smith after 1 year. They'll have three coaches in 3 years. They'll be drafting a quarterback, so you need to find a coach that's not just a stopgap, a guy that you believe can be your head coach of the future. So I think Houston's a lock for a new coach. I think Denver is a lock as well. So that's two teams that will be looking for head coaches. Carolina has already fired their coach. So Carolina will be hiring a new head coach. Carolina. By the way, their old coach, Matt Rule, became the new head coach at the University of Nebraska this weekend. So Matt Rule gets fired less than a month later. He's the new head coach at Nebraska. Congrats to Coach Rule as he tries to turn around another failing program as he did at Temple and also as he did at Baylor. Around the league, Rams. Rams are a question mark for me. I don't think they'll fire Sean McVay. What if he leaves? What if he's tired? He looks at this team and says, we're not going to be any good. And he kind of looks around and ponders and says, well, maybe I could get into TV. Maybe I can do some studio work, make some money, and come back coach later on if I want, like Sean Payton just did. Rams are a question mark for me, but I think they'll be looking. Arizona. Cliff Kingsbury and that Arizona team just have they find ways to lose games. Kyler and Cliff don't mix. They gave Kyler a big extension in the offseason. They also gave one to Cliff. But you can't fire all the players, right? Somebody going to take Kyler Murray's salary right now? You fire Cliff Kingsbury, you bring in a new coach, see if those two can find some magic. You drafted Kyler first overall for a reason. It hasn't worked with Cliff Kingsbury. You got to pay him out the remainder of that money. You fire him, you hope he takes a college job. They take on some of that salary. It's not as bad as for you when you hire your new coach. Colts, question mark. Colts have Jeff Saturday right now. That does not mean he'll be their head coach moving forward. The Colts play tonight, Monday Night Football, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But he's an interim coach. Maybe he doesn't like it. Maybe the back half of their season isn't that successful, and they decide to go in another direction. Crazier things have happened. And I'm not saying yes or no there, but I think that's a question mark team for me. So with Houston's a lock, Denver, Carolina, I think the Rams, I think that will happen, Arizona, and Colts. That's 6 teams so far that I think will be looking at new head coaches. I mentioned the Packers. What do they do? I wouldn't do it, but again, we're talking about people that are really upset and they need to find answers. Who knows? Look around. Bills won't. Dolphins won't. Jets won't. Giants won't. Titans are going to keep Mike Vrabel. Houston's going to fire their coach. Doug Peterson's not going to get fired in Jacksonville. Chargers. Chargers are dependent on making the playoffs. Chargers make the playoffs. I think Brandon Staley keeps his job. If Chargers miss the playoffs, Brandon Staley will be out as the Chargers head coach. Because that would be 3 seasons, no playoff appearances, and you have Justin Herbert at quarterback. Yes, there's injuries. There's always injuries in Los Angeles. You need to find a way to overcome it. That'd be my ruling there. Raiders, I think the Raiders are going to keep Josh McDaniels. They're having some success now. There's too much money. They're not going to fire him. They'll keep him. That's one I'm going to push aside. NFC South, Carolina. I don't think Tampa Bay will fire Todd Bowles after 1 season, but you never know. Potentially could happen. You got Bucs, you got Carolina, you got Atlanta in there. Those are just some obvious teams to me. So what I just named, that is 8 potential job openings. And maybe there's a wild card one in there that we don't see coming. I didn't expect Sean Payton to step down last year. Does Dennis Allen get fired in New Orleans after 1 year? Wouldn't rule it out. Maybe they'll give him another run, but again, it's his second time as a head coach in this league, and he's had very little success. He's made some questionable decisions. He started Andy Dalton the last 8 games, and Jameis Winston's healthy. Why is Andy Dalton constantly behind center? Is he giving them the best chance to win? Not in my opinion. He had put up 0 points yesterday against San Francisco. Now, in saying that, here are some head coaching candidates to look out for. Sean Payton, obviously. DeMeco Ryans, he's the current defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. To me, he's an obvious one to get a job. The defense in San Francisco is always great. Robert Saleh was defensive coordinator in San Francisco. He got the Jets job. I think DeMeco Ryans will parlay that into getting a head coaching job this offseason. Ken Dorsey, offensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills. I'm not sure he gets one, but we'll see. Leslie Frazier, defensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills. He's interviewed for jobs in the past, didn't get one. I think he will be on the radar. So look around. Nobody's jumping out to me other than those guys. Those are 4 guys that I think will be interviewed by multiple teams, looked at. To be a great offensive coordinator that teams like Kevin O'Connell was in Los Angeles. They won the Super Bowl, so he got even more attention. Because you win a Super Bowl, because you go on a deep run, and then Minnesota decides to hire him. And it's worked out. He's been a solid hire so far. And there'll be maybe a college coach that gets a job. Cliff Kingsbury hasn't worked out. Matt Rule hasn't worked out. So maybe that's telling you it's not a great idea. Does Bill O'Brien get another kick at a can? The NFL has been the offensive coordinator for the Alabama Crimson Tide the last 2 seasons. There would be one outlet that reports that Lincoln Riley would be looking into an NFL job, even though that's completely not true. He's happy at USC. He's making all kinds of money. He's got access to the private jet. And he's got the Heisman Trophy winner for another season in Caleb Williams. He's not going anywhere, but you'll hear that report. Mike McCarthy could get fired with the Cowboys. That's another team. Cowboys. If the Cowboys go out early in the playoffs, does Jerry Jones fire Mike McCarthy and then try to get Sean Payton to come to Dallas to coach the team? Maybe. Always potential for something crazy to happen. But I think that's where we stand, where all of this there's a lot of change that's going to happen. A lot of change. And sometimes it's just about, to me, I look at certain teams and their records, and I think coaching has a lot to do with it. Tampa Bay being under 500, I think coaching has a lot to do with that record. Raiders at 4-7, I think the decisions of Josh McDaniels and key moments has affected that team, and their win-loss record would be better if he had made better decisions. But then I get to 2 teams yesterday that made plays and made coaching decisions that I would make 100 out of 100 times. If you score a touchdown in the last 2 minutes of a game, and you're down by 1 point, even if, say, there's 20 seconds left, there should be one play from that offense when you're down there. You're down by a point. If you kick an extra point, you tie, you go to overtime. No. If you're in a position late in a football game and you are down by a point after you just scored a touchdown, you go for 2 every time. You go for 2 every time because you play to win the game. And I look at Doug Peterson and I look at Brandon Staley yesterday, and I give them credit for having guts to go for it in big moments. Brandon Staley's been crushed at times by media people for being an analytics coach, for being a guy who relies too much on the numbers. Yesterday, to me, Brandon Staley was a guy that just went on gut instinct. The Chargers rolled down the field late in that game against the Cardinals. Justin Herbert was playing really good football, and they scored a touchdown. And he said, you know what? He looked at it and said, I got Justin Herbert at quarterback, and we got this Arizona defense that's tired after that long drive, and I've got Keenan Allen back. I got Gerald Everett in this game. I got Carter, who's playing really good football lately. We're going for this. And he hits Gerald Everett on a quick strike, and they go up by a point, and they win that game. That game pushes the Chargers to 6-5. You lose that game, you're 5-6, and you are in deep, deep trouble. You cannot lose a game to you can't lose to the Cardinals. Period. A team with a losing record, a team that has nothing going for them right now. You need to win it. And I don't care if they would have failed that play. I would not have criticized them for it. That is the correct play. You go for 2 every time. You try to win the game. You don't play for a tie. You just don't. Also, the Jags are coming off a bye, and to me, they're having a disappointing season. But Trevor Lawrence had a hell of a game yesterday, and he went down the field on that last drive of the game and throws a beauty touchdown in the back of the end zone. A really impressive throw, a great catch, puts the Jags down with 11 seconds to play. And on a 2-point conversion, Zay Jones goes on an out route. He hits him in stride. Jags go up by a point. Justin Tucker misses a 67-yard field goal, and the Jags improve to 4-7. I don't believe the Jags are going to make the playoffs. But to me, this was a building block game for the Jaguars to turning around that franchise and starting to build some camaraderie and build some expectation and just setting a standard for what's expected in Duval. This is hope for the future. Trevor Lawrence looked like the first overall pick yesterday. He played with conviction. He played with confidence. And he threw every ball in stride, and it looked great. The Jags beat a really good Baltimore team who had won 4 in a row. The Jags played spoil a little bit, but you also can say that they are still in the mix. I look at this AFC. You got the Chiefs. You got the Dolphins, who are actually ahead of the Bills right now because the Dolphins beat the Bills head-to-head. You got the Ravens are still ahead of the Bengals. They both have a 7-4 record, but the Bengals lost to the Ravens. Then you have the Tennessee Titans, followed by the Bills, Ravens, and the New York Jets currently have the 7th seed in the AFC. From there, you have New England at 6-5, who lost to Minnesota on Thanksgiving Eve. You have the Chargers at 6-5, following their big win yesterday. They needed it. And you got some teams in the mix. You got Cleveland at 4-7. Suddenly, they're still alive. Deshaun Watson's returning. They found some momentum. And they got Houston next week. Pencil in a win already. You have the Jags at 4-7. And the Jags aren't a great team, but they are still in the mix because you never know what's happening in this AFC. And you also have the Raiders at 4-7, following Josh Jacobs' huge day where he had over 300 total yards, including an 85-yard touchdown, a walk-off, in overtime to beat the Seahawks. So let's talk about these scenarios. The Raiders have the Chargers next week in the divisional game. Raiders win that game, they will be 5-7. The Chargers will be 6-6. The teams will be separated by 1 game. New England has the Buffalo Bills this week. They're at home and it's on Thursday night. New England's offense looked better than it ever did on Thursday night, but that was in a dome. That was in an arena that you can control. Who knows what the weather will be like in New England on Thursday night? It's going to be cold. It's going to be much different. We'll see what Mac Jones, if he can follow up a really good game, even though it came in a losing effort. But the Bills will be favored in New England to win that game. But an important one. Jets. The Jets coming off a huge win. Mike White making his debut in the season looked fantastic. The Jets, I'm just going to confirm this. I had it earlier, had it written down. I'm forgetting who the Jets got this week. They might have the Ravens, I think, now that I think about it. They might have the Ravens, which is an important... No, the Ravens have the Broncos this coming weekend. But the Jets do have a big game. It's I'm losing it on who they're playing, but it's a tough opponent, whoever it is, and that'll be a big game. 7-4, if they can stay ahead of teams. To me, every team is still in this mix because the Jets had an impressive day yesterday. Mike White came in for Zach Wilson, and he played great. 21 for 28, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. In his first start last year, he had 4 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. The next game, he had 4 interceptions. Mike White is the quarterback of now for the New York Jets. It's way too early to say he's a franchise quarterback or he's the quarterback of the future. He is their quarterback currently. This could be off the rails very, very quickly, but they have somebody who's better than Zach Wilson right now and won them a game against the Chicago Bears yesterday. That's all we know about the Jets, is that they have their quarterback for right now. Maybe he'll be great and he'll play consistently well. I don't know. I wouldn't bank on it. If I'm a Jets fan, have low expectations. That's what's best for Jets fans. Just don't expect much and maybe something will happen. You are in a playoff spot right now after 12 weeks. Who would have predicted that for the New York Jets? Who would have predicted that the Jets are ahead of New England, even though New England's beaten the Jets twice? And the Jets are ahead of New England. 4 losses, 2 of them coming against the Patriots, who might be 500 after this week's game against the Bills. But I mentioned this Week 13 slate is great. To me, Raiders-Chargers is a sneaky, sneaky good game. Because the Raiders have won 2 in a row and they found some energy. Josh Jacobs leads the NFL in rushing. He's in a contract season. He got his 5th-year option declined before the season started. He is playing for money. He has over 100 more rushing yards than any other running back in the NFL. 300 all-purpose yards yesterday for Josh Jacobs. He won them that game. There is belief in Las Vegas. They went into Seattle, one of the toughest buildings to play in, and they won that football game. Derek Carr had 2 interceptions in the first quarter, but he found his game. He settled in. They ran the football. I think there's a lot of the Bills. So as to play, Dolphins have the Niners, they have the Chargers, they have the Bills, they have the Jets, they have the tough schedule looming. I think the Bills are in good shape to make it. Will they win their division? I don't think that's a lock it, even though I think the Bills have an easier schedule down the stretch here to do it. And the Dolphins have to go to Buffalo to play, which it's one thing to play in Buffalo in September. It's another thing to play there in January. They also got to go play in New England in January. Both not exactly the most fun scenarios for the Dolphins. To juxtapose that to the NFC. Currently, we got the Eagles with the first slot, 10-1. Followed by the Vikings at 9-2. And you'd think it'd be the Cowboys, right? No, they're in the wild card because they're in the NFC East. Tampa's in 4th in the AFC South. So who else is around? NFC East, NFC South, NFC West, San Francisco. San Francisco currently has the 3rd seed, followed by Tampa Bay. Then you have the Cowboys. You have the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders, who have not lost a start where Taylor Heineke, the Green Lizard, is under center, they currently have the 7th seed. All 4 NFC East teams are in a playoff spot if the season ended today. Seattle, losing the game yesterday, drops out. They're 6-5. The Washington football team is 7-5. They have a game this weekend against the New York Giants. Massive game. Then they have a bye week. So Seattle's at 6-5 chasing. Then you have Atlanta at 5-7, who lost the Commanders yesterday. And you really got nobody else. Packers are 4-8. They're still in the mix, but not really. Detroit's 4-7. They're going to need a lot of help. There's less possibilities in the NFC. For Seattle, their best bet is they got the Rams on their schedule, and the Rams are a lock win right now. Because they're without Matthew Stafford. Allen Robinson's out for the season. Cooper Kupp is out for the season. Stafford should be out for the season. Their defense played extremely well yesterday, limiting Kansas City to 26 points. That was a spirited effort by that defense in a loss. But they got no reason to win games, even though they don't have their first-round pick. Detroit will get a better pick every time the Rams lose. So there's a chance that all 4 NFC East teams make the playoffs. Because Seattle's got to win some games. They still got to play the Niners down the stretch here. They got to play them on a Thursday night, and that's not an easy team to beat. So that's where our playoffs stand right now, heading into Week 13. That to me is one of the best weekends of the NFL schedule so far. It has a lot to like. Well, the Jets play Minnesota this weekend. Jets at Minnesota. It's another good game. With that pass defense in Minnesota, the way it played Thursday night, Mike White may be able to throw over the damn field. Elijah Moore had a touchdown yesterday. He's excited because Zach Wilson's no longer the quarterback. He's getting into the game. He's fired up. The NFL is it's a weird place, man. Like, to me, the Eagles last night, they impressed me because I saw multiple ways that they can win in January by running the football down people's throats. In the cold, that's how you can win if you have home field advantage. Minnesota is going to have to come outside to play the Eagles if it remains the same. If Minnesota keeps winning, they keep the second slot, they have to go to Philly to win a game. The Cowboys play Philly at Jerry's place on Christmas Eve, but they're 2 games behind of the Eagles right now. Cowboys have 3 losses. Eagles have 1. Only loss to the Commanders. If Eagles stay in first place, they have home field. Guess what? Lincoln Financial is outside. Cowboys playing basically a dome. It's warm in Dallas all the time. It's a different animal to go outside in those conditions and try to win a football game. In January. I just see them. Miles Sanders is running. He's 5th in the NFL in rushing. Jalen Hurts can run. A.J. Brown needs to stop fumbling the football. He's got fumbles in back-to-back weeks. He's still a great receiver. Devontae Smith, their offensive line is the best in football still, led by Jason Kelce, the All-Pro center, who might just go to the Hall of Fame. He keeps playing the way he is. And after 12 weeks, MVP candidates. Mahomes still is out in front as the number 1 contender for me. I think Jalen Hurts would be number 2. He's played extremely well all season long. He's been really consistent. Joe Burrow has got to be in that mix. Joe Burrow is right there in Tua. These are the 4 guys for me that could win it. And Mahomes has already won an MVP. So that is already a strike against him. I don't think they'll want to vote for Mahomes again. I'll tell you what. If you have faith in the Miami Dolphins, the bet is to go on Tua as an underdog because he'll have big odds. They got to play at San Francisco, at the Chargers, at the Bills. You get some big wins in there, this Dolphins team. Those are impressive headline-type wins. In particular, if Tua can beat Justin Herbert head-to-head, where that's always been a battle because they went in the same draft class and people seem to bicker over the fact that either Herbert's better than Tua or Tua's better than Justin Herbert. It doesn't matter. They fight over that. It's a big deal to some people on Twitter and on social media. I don't know why, get a life, but that seems to be a topic of conversation. Turkey Day. I want to have some thoughts on Turkey Day quickly. I will say I thought the Thanksgiving games were great. All of them were pretty good. They had their moments for sure, were all entertaining. You saw, all close games. You saw one of the greasiest backdoor covers in league history when the Giants scored a touchdown with 3 seconds left, or something, 8 seconds left, to keep that score to 8 points. They covered that spread. It almost made me throw my book here where I take my notes because I did not have the New York Giants. I took the stupid New England Patriots, who Devontae Parker, if he could have caught the football, would have had a 4-team parlay bet hit because I had Mississippi State. They outright won. I had the Detroit Lions. They covered. Can't have everything. Patriots screw me again. They screw me against the Jets. They screw themselves against the Vikings. They play Thursday night against the Buffalo Bills at home. Tonight, it's Colts and Steelers. Colts are at home. They are a 2.5-point favorite. I don't know what to make of this game. Jeff Saturday in his third game as the head coach of the Colts. They lost a heartbreaker to the Eagles last week. The Steelers are coming off a win against the New Orleans Saints. Steelers, we're starting to see some impressive things from Kenny Pickett. He looks like he can play the position. He hasn't been an all-star yet, but I think you're starting to see some things progress. George Pickens is a really good receiver for the Steelers. No doubt about that. He plays extremely well every week. He's only getting better. I like that the Steelers got rid of Chase Claypool. To me, he's a cancer. I wouldn't want him in my locker room. You got Pickens, you got Deontay Johnson, you have Najee Harris. It doesn't behoove the Steelers to win this game. Quite frankly, the Steelers need a season where they can pick high in the draft. They may not want a quarterback, but there are skill position players. There are guys that you can take. You can take an offensive lineman to help this team, to help Kenny Pickett going into 2023. I don't see myself gambling on this game because I bet on underdogs, as you know. I think the Colts are going to win this game. 2.5 seems like a small line. Strange line, quite frankly. 4-6-1 Colts against the 3-7 Pittsburgh Steelers. Colts win this game. They're 5-6-1. They are in the mix. As crazy as that sounds. Because after what I just went through with you guys, Colts win tonight, they'll be 5-6-1. They would be a couple games out of that last wildcard spot. They need every win that they can get at this point. They'd be 5-6-1. I mean, Cleveland's got 7 losses. Jags have 7 losses. Raiders have 7 losses. Chargers have 5 losses, as does New England. And you have the Jets at 7-4. So, who knows? Colts, I think, still want to play for a playoff spot. They're not giving up. They don't feel like it's time to. Even though they know they need a quarterback going into next year and different things, but they're playing for this season. If I'm betting tonight, I'm taking the Colts. But I would probably take the under in the game because I don't see a whole lot of scoring tonight. It's a weird Monday night. It's the end of Week 12. Both teams offensively are hit and miss. Colts put up 16 points last week against the Eagles. You saw Green Bay. They put up 33 last night against the Eagles defense. Steelers still have a pretty... TJ Watt is back in. He's playing. Cam Hayward is healthy. Minka Fitzpatrick should be active tonight for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That Pittsburgh Steelers defense still has all-pro and Pro Bowlers on it. I think they will get to the quarterback a few times behind it. This will test the Indianapolis Colts offensive line. It's looked pretty good in the first 2 weeks, but they have not played TJ Watt, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. He's a flat-out difference maker, and he's one of the best players in the entire league. What I would do is tonight, if I was going to make a bet, here's a parlay. I like the under in the football game. I like an anytime TJ Watt sack tonight. And I would go over on Matt Ryan rushing yards tonight. There won't be much, but Matt Ryan seems to scoot for a couple of yards every time he's in there. He had over 40 yards a couple weeks ago. So those are a couple of betting props I would look at tonight. The under in the game, TJ Watt anytime sack, and Matt Ryan over the rushing total tonight. Just a couple plays to look at before kickoff this evening. To college football. What a weekend in college football. And really, what happened this weekend was some things became very clear for me. It might have been a little murky as we closed up shop last Thursday, but they are much clearer now. Because we had some big games this weekend. A lot of things happened. Let's start with the game. Michigan played at Ohio State. Ohio State was an 8.5-point favorite. And Michigan's best offensive player, Blake Corum, did not play. He ran the first play of the game. His knee couldn't do it. He did not take another snap. Michigan thumped the Ohio State. J.J. McCarthy had over 3 touchdown passes of over 45 yards. And Michigan beat Ohio State at the shoe. In a shocker for me. Without Blake Corum, I had watched Michigan a ton. I watched their entire game against the Fighting Illini, and I did not see J.J. McCarthy have the ability to play that way when it comes to the passing game. I thought Michigan had decent receivers. I just didn't think J.J. could make the throws, quite frankly. Boy, was I wrong about that. In the first quarter and a half, the Michigan offense was putrid. But to their credit, they continued to fight. Their defense came up with a turnover. Then had another stop inside the red zone. There was only a field goal. And then you saw McCarthy start to get some plays. The corners and the safeties for the Ohio State are going to be watching tape for months, just looking at the performance, saying what could have been. They primarily are to blame for this, and I would say just lack of discipline from the Ohio State. They were more focused on getting their licks in on Michigan, trying to be the superior team, I think feeling a little inferior after last year's loss, and they took it on the chin. The Ohio State has lost back-to-back seasons to Michigan in really embarrassing fashion. Michigan was better from the second quarter on. J.J. McCarthy was the better quarterback than C.J. Stroud on Saturday afternoon. And now Michigan controls their fate in Ohio State just like they were last year, heads into championship weekend, sitting on the sideline, hoping to be bailed out by either teams on the field or by the College Football Playoff Committee. Because Michigan's undefeated. They're 12-0, and they play Purdue this Saturday night in the Big Ten championship game. I want to save my thoughts on the championship weekend for a second. But also this weekend, TCU crushed Iowa State 62-14. Max Duggan, 17 for 24, 212 yards, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. Max Duggan is going to be nominated for the Heisman. He's playing that good. He's not a great quarterback, and he's got great fundamentals, but he finds a way to win. He gives this TCU team whatever they need on a given week. He will be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I'd be shocked if he was not. TCU remains undefeated, and they will play in the Big 12 championship game this Saturday as well. With a win, they are going to the college football playoff. Book it. USC beat Notre Dame in a hard-fought battle, 38-27. Caleb Williams had 4 total touchdowns, 3 rushing. And Notre Dame fought. Drew Pine, I think, had his best game as a quarterback at the University of Notre Dame. Played it really well. He did throw 1 interception. But Notre Dame stayed in this game. They fought hard. And after the way they started, Marcus Freeman deserves a ton of credit. And he should really be proud of this Notre Dame team because I don't think they're that talented, quite frankly. But I think they outwork teams. They have the second best tight end in the country behind Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. And they got a great recruiting class coming in for next season. So things are looking up in Notre Dame. I think they got the right coach. I like the way they just approached this season. They didn't give up. They lost to Marshall. They got crushed by Stanford. But they didn't let it affect them too much. They continued to play hard and showed up in the big moments. But USC beats Notre Dame 38-27. And number 1 team in the country, Georgia, beats Georgia Tech. So when the weekend started, Georgia was number 1. They win a game comfortably. They will remain number 1. The Ohio State was number 2. They get crushed by Michigan. They will not be the number 2 team in the country. Michigan is now the 2nd team in the country. The college playoff rankings come out on Tuesday night, but I'm telling you what they're going to be before they happen. Number 3 will now be TCU. TCU remains undefeated. They've done nothing to get themselves out of that ranking. They are number 3, and this is where we get complicated. USC has 1 loss. The Ohio State has 1 loss. USC has lost their game to Utah earlier in the season. They lost to Utah by 1 point. Utah has 3 losses, but they are ranked inside the top 15. Ohio State has 1 loss. They lost to Michigan. As I just mentioned, they are the second best team in the country. And however, it was a game that wasn't that particularly close. They weren't that impressive. So style points mean something in college football. USC's loss is a better loss than Ohio State's, in my personal opinion. So that means USC would be number 4, and you have Ohio State at number 5. Now, coming into this weekend, a couple teams were still in the mix to make the Final Four. One of those teams was LSU. LSU next weekend in the SEC Championship game will play Georgia. They're looking forward to that game. If they win that game, they will be the first 2-loss team to ever get into the college football playoff. Well, you can forget about that dream, LSU. All the LSU guys in the media that are propping up that team, Brian Kelly did have a good first season. LSU lost to Texas A&M on Saturday. Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher gets his big win on the resume. And wow, what a gut punch to that program, and really makes the SEC championship game a whole lot less interesting because LSU has 3 losses. They're done. They could win the SEC. They're not going anywhere. Georgia will still make the playoff, but LSU, with that win, they will not be in the college. You're not getting in with 3 losses, including losses to A&M. Sorry. And Florida State. Not happening. Also a team that was still in the mix, Clemson. I talked about Clemson on Thursday with Matt Wright. We said Clemson was a 14.5-point favorite against the South Carolina Gamecocks. And I said, what the hell kind of line is this? South Carolina coming off the biggest win maybe of the season, defeating Tennessee, crushing them 72-14 or something like that. Spencer Rattler, game of his career. Oh, they're going to have a letdown, right? Because they're going to Clemson. Clemson, prior to Saturday, had won 40 consecutive home games. Well, that streak is over because South Carolina, down by as many as 17 points in the game, rallied all the way back. Spencer Rattler had an up-and-down day, threw 2 interceptions, including 1 in the red zone, but they battled. That defense came up, and they win the game 31-30. And the crazy thing here is that South Carolina, they have 2 straight wins over top 10 teams. That is the first time they've done that in the history of that program. 2 straight wins against top 10 teams ranked in the country, beats Tennessee, and you beat Clemson. Clemson, one of the best programs over the last decade in college football. They beat them on their last game of the season prior to a bowl game. It also gets South Carolina to 8-4 with Mississippi State, with Ole Miss. What a season for Spencer Rattler. A good choice to go to South Carolina. A really positive season for the Gamecocks. What a moment to win at Death Valley in Clemson. So, with all that being said, Clemson, done. You're not making the playoff. LSU, done. You're not making the playoff. So Ohio State is 5th on my list. Number 6 now is Alabama. Alabama, who beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl, they will not play this weekend in championship weekend because championship weekend works. You will play if you're in a conference championship game. Alabama's not. It's LSU versus the Georgia Bulldogs. Alabama only has 2 losses, however, LSU with 3. Number 7 to me is Penn State. Penn State has 2 losses on their record. Losses to Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan has 0 losses. Ohio State has 1. Really good season for Penn State football. James Franklin's running a really good program there. Sean Clifford's his last season as a college quarterback, but they got really good young running backs. They get a good recruiting class. Penn State's on the rise. Number 8 is Tennessee. This is the crazy one for me of the weekend. I had Vanderbilt plus 14. They had some really impressive wins. Tennessee lost their starting quarterback, but Joe Milton came in. They beat Vandy 56-0 on the road. Tennessee only had 2 losses this year. Losses to South Carolina, which is more impressive now when you think about it, and to Georgia, number 1 team in the country. Really good season. Number 9, my Washington Huskies. Michael Penix Jr., transfer from Indiana, first-year head coach at Washington. They are back. Unfortunately, Michael Penix is a senior. He'll be leaving college. I think he might actually get some looks from the NFL. He's played really well. Washington has rebuilt that program. They look really good in the Pac-12. It's unfortunate that USC and Washington are in the same division because I think that would have been a fun Pac-12 title game. And number 10, I have Clemson. They still only have 2 losses, but they are severely overrated. So, this weekend, this is championship weekend, and these are the games that we need to pay attention to. TCU versus Kansas State. Kansas State's got 3 losses on the season, but they're a good football team. The Big 12 is a competitive. Texas had a solid team. Oklahoma's turning around later in the year. Kansas was 500. The Big 12 was competitive all year long. TCU wins that game. They're in the Final Four. They lose that game. I don't think it's a lock. And here's what gets interesting. So TCU, we'll talk about that in a second. Michigan versus Purdue. I think Michigan's going to steamroll Purdue. This is a Big Ten that on the other side is so weak. You had Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa. Thank God Iowa's not in this Big Ten title game because they're so pathetic on offense. But Purdue, Aiden O'Connell, 7th-year senior, will make one of his final starts playing against Michigan for Purdue. Michigan wins that game, they're through. LSU, Georgia, as I just talked about, I think even if Georgia loses this game to LSU, they will be in the Final Four. Maybe not, but I think they will be. The only way I don't see Georgia making the Final Four is if TCU wins, Michigan wins. So Michigan wins, TCU wins, USC wins, and then say if Georgia lost to LSU, the Ohio State might get in over Georgia because their loss would be to a 1-loss Michigan, and that loss to Georgia would be to 3-loss LSU. Utah versus USC. Huge opportunity. USC wins this game on Friday night. They are in. They are in the Final Four. It would be incredible. Lincoln Riley's first season at USC to get to the college football playoff. They win this game there, and they beat the only team that's beaten them this year in Utah. It was a 1-point win. This will be on a neutral site. And to me, they win, they're in, and I also think it doesn't matter if they win this game. Caleb Williams has already won the Heisman Trophy. He's the best player in college football. He's going to go number 1 in the draft next year. He's phenomenal. Caleb Williams has the Heisman. And if he can lead the USC Trojans to a win on Friday night in the Pac-12 title game, they are in the Final Four as well. North Carolina, Clemson, less meaning, but it's a college football game I'll be watching. Here's the doomsday scenario where Alabama seemed dead to rights. I think they still have a chance to get in. Here's how. If USC loses, they'll have 2 losses, both losses to Utah. So that's not great odds. I don't think they get in with 2 losses, both lost to Utah. They drop below Ohio State and Alabama, for that matter, because Alabama's losses would be to 2-loss Tennessee and to 3-loss LSU. It's splitting hairs, but I think they drop below those 2 teams. So USC would be done if they lose to Utah again. I mentioned the Georgia scenario. I think Georgia's going to win, however, but there is that option. Michigan loses to Purdue. That's a really ugly loss. That's not going to happen. But if they lost to Purdue, here's what I think. TCU is in the Final Four. I don't think the committee wants TCU in the Final Four. I think TCU deserves it. They've won every game. If TCU loses to Kansas State, who has 3 losses, I could see the committee going like this. Georgia, Michigan, we're going to assume USC wins. So USC loses. I can see the committee going Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama. Alabama leapfrogging a 1-loss TCU to get into the Final Four. They'd be the 4th seed, and they play Georgia in one of the 2 semifinals. There's not a 0% chance Alabama doesn't get into the college football playoff. I don't think TCU is a lock to win on Saturday. I think it's going to be a really close game because TCU, other than this past weekend, plays in close games, but they control their own destiny. They win that game, they are in. They are through. They get to the Final Four. USC controls their destiny. They lose Friday night, they are not in. They are not in. But I will say, I think if Georgia wins, if Michigan wins, and TCU win, I think Ohio State will get that 4th spot over Alabama. Because Alabama would have lost to 2 teams not in the Final Four, whereas Michigan is in the Final Four, and that's a more impressive loss. So for the 2 blue blood programs in Ohio State and Alabama, they still have a chance to get into the college football playoff as we approach conference championship weekend. Well, you got UCF playing Tulane this weekend. Tulane's in their first conference championships game in program history. You got Akron playing Buffalo in the MAC final, MAC conference championship. North Carolina, Clemson in the ACC championship. What I like about this weekend is you got 2 games on Friday night. Utah USC is on Friday night. I love that. Spread them out. 1 o'clock, I believe, is the TCU game. Then at 5, we have LSU, Georgia. And at 9 o'clock Saturday night, we have Michigan, Purdue, and North Carolina, Clemson. It's college football day before we get into bowl season. And we get the college football semifinals on December 30th. And then the national championship game on the 9th, I believe, of January. It's over in about a month, if you can believe it. It's sad. It is. It's really, but this weekend's big. And my top 10 is as follows: Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC, Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State, Tennessee, Washington, Clemson. See what the committee says Tuesday night, but it was a fascinating weekend. Lots of things that can still happen in college football. One thing that I don't see changing, Caleb Williams is winning the Heisman Trophy. Book it. Quickly to some hockey. We'll talk more hockey tomorrow because it was a heavy football day. What do I want to say about hockey here? Edmonton Oilers Saturday afternoon, if you didn't see it, came back from 3 goals down in the 3rd period against New York Rangers. Couple thoughts. Most important period of both teams' seasons And for a number of reasons. Number one, Edmonton needed that win. They had no confidence. They were lifeless in the second period, turning the puck over left and right. Evan Bouchard scores 2 goals. He hadn't had a goal all season. He shows up. Good for the Oilers. You got to win. You needed that. Here's a word of advice. No more Jesse Puljujarvi with Connor McDavid's not scoring any points because Jesse Puljujarvi is he's a pylon. He adds nothing to the line. He brings nothing in creativity, and he doesn't go in the corner to get the puck. He's a failed experiment. He's not a good NHL player. Get rid of him. I will lose going Zach Hyman, Draisaitl, and McDavid and keep the rest of my team looking average. It got them to a conference final last year. Do it again. Zach Hyman is skating better than I've ever seen him. He looks faster. He's flying out there for the Edmonton Oilers. He's playing great, Zach Hyman. Enough of Jesse Puljujarvi. I don't know how they didn't trade Jesse Puljujarvi in the offseason. No team must have wanted him. Which I get because he doesn't bring any intensity. He doesn't go into the corner. Enough. Enough of Jesse Puljujarvi. Rangers angle. If the Rangers somehow miss the playoffs or if the Rangers fail and say don't go as far as they should, it will not be because of certain big name players like an Adam Fox or a Mika Zibanejad. I'd throw it on Artemi Panarin because I think the guy's just one of the laziest players in the league. It's going to be because of their coach. Gerard Gallant is a really nice guy. He's from PEI. I know he's well-liked. And he normally has a lot of early success with the teams he joins because they just play free-flowing style. It's a new coach. You get that new coach bump, and it's a lot of good energy. Gerard Gallant doesn't coach any systems. You got a young team, in particular on the back end, and you're not having forwards come back in their own zone. You're trying to stretch past play. You're asking your defense with limited experience to do more than they're prepared to do. Look at the Maple Leafs and what they're doing. It's a simplistic thing for these defense right now. There are easy exit passes out of the zone. The stretch pass is done. Sheldon Keefe realized that's a losing strategy. That's a loser's race. And he's made changes so that his team can win. Gerard Gallant, you're standing on that bench every night. You're bitching at all the players. How about you design something differently schematically? Because guess what? Zibanejad scoring goals. Adam Fox getting points. Yes, Shesterkin's not playing great, but you got a young-ass defense core. How about you coach them up? How about you do something to help the team other than just yell at the refs because they didn't get the challenge right, which I'll do for you, but coach this team. The Rangers are a great group of players. To me, their biggest weakness right now is that head coach. I'm not saying fire the guy, but I'm telling Gerard Gallant, do something to help this team because you haven't done jack shit this year to improve this product. Wake up, smell the roses, and realize what's in front of you. Jersey's better than you. The Islanders are better than you. Pittsburgh's better than you. I believe you're 5th in the Metro. You got Jersey tonight. They will teach you, if you're not ready to play, that they can kick your ass. Wake up, smell the coffee, and start coaching that team. This team should be elite, and they're not. And when coaching is at fault, you got to point it out. I watch the games. This is bad coaching. That's it for today. Big show tomorrow. Seamus will be on. We'll recap a number of things. Monday Night Football. A lot of good NHL tonight. Maple Leafs are in Detroit. Interesting game. Mentioned Devils Rangers this evening. Always a really entertaining game. Florida's in Edmonton tonight. You got Dallas playing St. Louis tonight, which should be fun. So a lot of good NHL games. You get a full slate of NBA action as well. Raptors are playing the Cavaliers, who have caught fire again. The Red Hot Lakers host the Pacers tonight. So a lot of good sports. Indy, 2.5-point home favorites against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football. That's what's on tap. We'll recap it all tomorrow, and we'll talk about a number of different things from around the sports world. So until then, take care. Have a great Monday evening, everybody. This is To The Point.